Welcome back to the Limitless CEO podcast, and today I'm going to be talking about a topic that might be a little bit controversial, and that is why motivating people does not work, and what actually does. Let me ask you a quick question. What if the pep talk that you're planning for tomorrow morning's meeting is lowering your team's performance instead of elevating it? What if the pep talk that you're planning to give yourself as you listen to this is actually lowering your performance instead of elevating it? What if the pep talk that you're giving to a family member or a friend is actually going to be lowering their performance instead of growing it? In the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be riffing on exactly why classic motivation is not working and is actually killing your performance faster than the boogeyman ever will. I'm going to be talking about the 3 buttons that are going to be driving self-powered individuals and teams. And don't worry, this isn't no Tony Robbins style high fives, let's jump around 15 minutes and hug each other kind of stuff. These are going to be shifts that are process driven. And you can try them even before lunch today. So let's talk about point number 1, clarity over hype. In sales, there's a very common statement that you'll offer here, and it's a confused mind never buys. And today I want to say a confused team or a confused mind never performs. I had one of my clients, Luke, an advertising agency client of mine. He tried offering his staff everything from pay rises to $500 Amazon vouchers every single month. And you know what happened? They all ended up leaving him. And his company was back to square one with him doing everything. Why was that? Here's the thing to take into consideration. Motivation is like an espresso. You drink an espresso at 9 a.m. and by 3 p.m. you've exhausted all that energy, and by 3 p.m. you crash. Clarity is like installing solar panels. An espresso is a jolt. Solar panels, those are limitless. You know, the more the sun hits them, the more energy that we're all going to have. Light is going to come into the room. It's limitless. So here's something to understand about yourself, about your team, about your family. People are not lazy. They're lost. If you show them a single destination and a visible scoreboard, they have more clarity. So take this into consideration. You can never hit a target if you don't know what it is. And a lot of the times we think we have clarity, but we don't. And as a result, we get lost and we try and find motivation. So how do we solve that? As cliche as it sounds, you have to create a vision. And I'm not talking about, some massive 3-page 61 hour thing that took the company or took you to create. No, I'm talking about, take Disney for example. What is Disney's vision for all their stuff? If you don't know, it's very simple. We treat everyone how we want to be treated. If you go up to any Disney employee and say, hey, what's the company vision? They all know we treat everyone how we want to be treated. For example, in Disney, if you go and ask a Disney employee, doesn't matter what their role is. Could be the cleaner, could be the assistant, could be anybody. If you ask them where something is, they take you there. They don't just send you off on directions. What does that do to people? A, they remember the vision. And B, well, they're part of something big. They're part of that vision. And as a result, everyone knows what it is. And we all know how Disney is operating today. Actually, they're just opening a new one in Abu Dhabi, which is pretty cool. I might have to try that one out. So that's the first thing. You got to draft a 1-sentence vision. Treat everyone how they want to be treated. What is it for you? Draft a 1-sentence vision that you can remember. If you're managing a team, draft a 1-sentence vision together so that everybody can remember it instead of it just being this one big thing that no one ever remembers. It's somewhere in a drawer or maybe somewhere on a desktop. That's not what we're looking for. Once you've got that one big vision, translate it into, I say the big 4. Put it on a 90-day scoreboard. Could be anything, revenue, pipeline, churn, bandwidth. It could be KPIs. Make sure that everyone understands what the big 4 are. Now, obviously, you can make them the top 2, the top 3. I think the big 4 sounds good. Have a 90-day scorecard. If you do not know what the score is, you lose interest in the game. Imagine if you was watching a football match, or as you guys might like to call it, soccer. If you imagine you was watching a soccer match, and what happens is the scores disappear, and you don't even know what the score is. It's only a matter of time before you kind of give up and just change the channel. Or if you're playing a game and there's no rules, there's no scorecard, eventually you just get bored. So what you really need to do is help everyone understand what the scorecard is. What does the scoreboard read? And post it, in every meeting. Share the Google Doc, put it on your Asana boards. Let people know. Don't keep it a secret. Give your team a GPS. Because, again, if you jump into a car with no GPS and you start driving, you reverse out your driveway, you put the car in reverse, you start driving, eventually you run out of fuel because you don't know where you're going. So give your team a GPS. Now, even with the best GPS, your team will still need the keys to the car. And that's where the second point comes in. Write this down. If you're listening, I'm about to say something really important. Autonomy beats adrenaline. Instead of just having that last minute rush, hey, we got a deadline tomorrow, let's do it. Autonomy beats adrenaline. Have you ever noticed that the harder you chase anything, the faster they hide? The faster you chase, the harder you chase your team, the faster they hide or the faster they run. Actually, I was speaking to someone last week and they were like, hey, I just lost one of my best employees and I did everything to keep this guy and he still ended up leaving. Now, there was more to that story than just kind of autonomy, but just a general rule of life, whether it's for motivation or whether it's for time or whether it's relationships, the harder you chase, the faster someone else runs. It's very simple. I knew a COO who reviewed every single deliverable before it left the door. And as a result, you know what happened? Turnaround times became a joke. People quit. And then one day, based on some work, we swapped this level of micromanagement and we made it into checklists. And everybody knew about these checklists. And, side note here, there is actually a book on this called the Checklist Manifesto. So I would advise everyone who's listening to this to go and buy it. I'm not I haven't got any affiliation with that book, but I think it's a really good book. So now, back to where we were. Immediately, the team cut project times by 41%. Now, was that a magic trick? No. He just gave people freedom to act without worrying. Is he going to, approve of this? How many times is he going to get me to change this one thing? You got to give people freedom. Think of autonomy like Tesla. Now, I know today in the world, Elon Musk is having an interesting time with his Teslas, but imagine, whether you like them or not, or whether you like the guy or not, think of autonomy as a Tesla on autopilot. You set the lane and it drives itself. But do you trust it? Some people do fall asleep. Now, if you're normal, do you trust it just with 100%? Absolutely not. You trust it, you put it on autopilot, you set the lane, it drives itself, but you're still on the wheel if the storm hits. You keep an eye, but you're not micromanaging. You're trusting it. I'm not going to put a percentage out, but you're trusting it, but you keep your eye on the wheel in case the storm hits. So what's the lesson here? Sustainable performance flows from freedom, not from micromanaging, not from adrenaline. And if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I have no team, that's okay. Are you trying to focus on everything, or are you going to only focus on the important things? Because if you try and fix everything at once, well, you're going to end up slowing yourself down, you're going to get in your head, and as a result, you're going to feel very overwhelmed. So whether you're working on your own or you're working with a team, I'm actually gobsmacked how many people don't know about what I'm about to mention. There is something called an SOP. A lot of people know about that, but no one knows what a workflow is. I mean, no one is a general statement, but a lot of people don't know what a workflow is. I've spoken to people who own $1 million companies, and I'm like, hey, do you have a workflow? Nope. You have to document a standard operating procedure, an SOP, or create a workflow, and then delegate the standard that you want from your team, from yourself, not the task. Let them know the standard, delegate that, leverage that, not the task. Now, what is a workflow? I feel like I have to answer this because a lot of people don't know what this is. I'm gobsmacked, but it is what it is. A workflow is actually something you can give to a 5-year-old. It's like on the left-hand side, it will say what needs to be done, in which order, and when. Well, technically, that's the workflow. So what needs to be done here, which order it needs to be done in, and when it needs to be done. That's really simple. It's a very simple document. It eliminates you having to think, and you're delegating this to the sheet, which is called a workflow. So walk in the morning, we check in with our, emergency emails. And then we do this other thing. And then we do this other thing. And then we check in with sales calls. And then we do this. And then we do the training, whatever it is. So you're delegating to an SOP. You're giving that to your team. And if you're on your own, you're doing this for yourself. And you're working from a workflow. You're not just showing up and doing whatever you feel like doing. You're working in this order of priority. The second thing I would say is, this is an up-and-coming company now. It doesn't matter if you use Loom or Zoom or anything you want to use, but you have to install what I call the Loom process. Why? So Loom is something that you can click. If someone asks you a question, instead of answering it one-to-one, you create a Loom video that's like 3 minutes long. Because eventually, you will have a database of all the questions that could be possibly asked and answers. So you create what's called a forever solution that people can go to. They don't have to keep asking you anything. You create these answers, and then as a result, you trust them with a place to go to get the answers without them contacting you. And you still verify, but you're not having to check in with everything. And the last one is actually my favorite, and that is rewarding initiative. Freedom is all about rewarding initiative, not hours. Of course, we all have hours to work. But you have to give people a reason to finish their work faster and better. Because what we have today is what? If you finish your work and you've got 3 hours left on the clock and the manager walks around and he sees you sitting down doing nothing, staring at a screen, you get in trouble. So we're not actually rewarding initiative, we're actually penalizing it. So now someone sits there and goes, well, I'll make sure that this drags out. What we want to do is reward initiative. Reward hard work, smart work. Reward people that are over-delivering. So now you have a GPS, you have a destination, you have the will. But again, the best Lamborghini needs fuel that refills itself. So what does that mean? Well, I should really start with this. Results don't really start with tasks. We all know that. If you listen to the last episode, you know that. They start with the ID badges that you wear in your head when you show up. When you start in the morning, what is the ID badge that you're using? Most companies plateau at a certain level in revenue figures for one reason and one reason only. And that is usually because they show up each morning with the firefighter hat on. Or worse, just the I'm here for a paycheck hat on. Or I'm waiting to hear what the boss says or what my client says. We show up with a certain identity and we can never usually outperform that identity. Think of your identity like a Netflix profile, right? If you switch to a kid's algorithm, the algorithm is going to feed you cartoons. Now, I'm not that interested in watching cartoons in this day and age. I don't know about you. But if you switch to, the CEO account, it's going to feed your strategy. Wrong profile, wrong playlist. If you show up tired and bored, or if you show up just ready to be reactive, wrong profile, wrong ID, wrong playlist. Instead, you want to show up with the right ID. You want your algorithm, your internal algorithm, to feed you the right playlist. Here's a mathematical equation. Performance equals your chosen identity multiplied by your emotional state. What does that mean? Skills matter, of course they do. Having the right strategy matters. But the lens that you step into each morning decides which skill you access and how long you sustain it. So how do you create the right ID? Obviously you got to ask yourself, what is the result that I want to achieve? What does performance mean? What does high performance mean? So let's say I want to be able to achieve what most people achieve in 10 hours in 5. Okay, great. That's very general because I'm trying to keep the result general for whoever is listening to this. But now, based on that result, let's say I want to, smash out an amazing team training. Okay, great. Who do I need to show up as? What is the identity I need to show up as? And what emotions drive that identity? So think of it this way. Name the role. Who are you when you are at your peak performance, at your A game? Are you like Superman, Wonder Woman? Are you like the Machino Joe? Are you like the architect CEO? Are you the builder engineer? Are you the clarity coach? Who are you? Name that role. That's the first piece. The second piece, prime the emotion. What are the top 2 emotions that drive, CEO Joe or the power man Sam or whatever it is? What are the top 2 emotions? Get clear on that. What are the top 2 emotions that I need to fuel in order to experience that ID? And then prime that emotion. I call it the 90-second rule. before I say this, there's 5 senses that drive everything we do. This is what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel, what you can smell, and what you can taste. So let's say you create an ID and it's called the Power Man Sam, and Power Man Sam's top 2 emotion is courage and confidence. So now you can ask yourself, okay, what can I create within my environment that I can see that can remind me of that? What music can I put on? What sounds can I put on that can remind me of that? What can I wear? What can I feel? Maybe like a watch or something. What can I feel that would remind me of that? And then obviously smell and taste. Just to make this simple, there are a lot out there. Everyone's got their own unique. It might be a perfume that's nostalgic, reminds you of a time where you was like rocking and rolling. But just to keep it very simple, sour tastes are really good for clarity. And then lemon balm and I think it's oud and peppermint are good scents to keep you focused. Just going to keep it simple. You could do your own research. So now you have a ritual. Music, power poses, deep breaths, whatever flips you into that role is the right thing to prime that emotion, prime that ID. And the last thing is create an environment that will support that. Is it putting it on your wallpaper? Is it, having an object on your desk, a photo of your family, a photo of a future you, or maybe a time where you climbed a mountain or whatever it is? Create visual cues because environment is stronger than willpower. Your willpower will eventually dissipate. So is this a single object on your desk that screams that identity? Put it out there. And then lastly, you can hope to do things. What you talk about as a dream. When you envision it, it's exciting. When you plan to do it, it's possible. Only when you schedule it does it become real. So, the Chinese are really good at this. It's called a mindfulness spell. But you can just set some alarms during the day that can go off and you just ask yourself one simple question. Am I still wearing that badge? If not, reprime. If you are, great. How can I make it even better? And this is kind of like a bonus. But at the end of that day, you got to be sure to step out of that identity. The last thing you want to do is go home to your wife or to your kids as the Machino Joe. What you really want to do is something called transition time. So you got to log out of that identity and transition. Think of a warrior coming back from war, blood all over him. He has to come in, take his armor off, his or her armor off, and transition out of the warrior and king mentality into the lover and the magician to be back with his queen, with his family. This clears your headspace and you can create the same thing I just mentioned for your home life as well. It's called transition time. So now combine your identity with the clarity and the autonomy that we've covered earlier, and your motivation turns into what's called inspiration. Actually, I don't even like motivation. I like something called inspiration. It's going to pull you. Motivation is like a balloon. It pops. Inspiration is something that pulls you to move forward. So now this turns into something exciting, something that inspires you, not a chore. Now you might be thinking, this all sounds great for teams of 10, but my team, my clients, they're scattered all across the time zones, across the globe, which is very normal today. We all live in a virtual reality. I say that's perfect. Clarity travels at a speed of Wi-Fi. Hype does not. Remote companies actually reported 25% higher execution rates once they adopted the Big Four plus the deep work blocks. Now that you've mapped out your clarity, you'll need the language to sell it internally. So what I've done is a 5-minute breakdown on crafting a vision statement for your team and made it really, really easy. Find it in the show notes below. If you're listening on Spotify, you can find it there. If you're listening on YouTube, you can find it there. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Subscribe, follow, share this with someone who needs to hear it. And I look forward to speaking to you on the next episode. Take care.